Hey guys, welcome to Whiskey and Literature. I'm your host, Captain Mike, and I do both whiskey and book reviews, and I'm excited because tonight it's bourbon in the house. It's a finished bourbon. This is Barrell Craft Spirits Cask Finishing Series Amburana Finished Bourbon. Amburana, what even the heck is that? It's a tree that grows in South America, Argentina, Brazil, and these types of areas. Traditionally, it's been used to age a local spirit made from fermented sugarcane. Now, if you think about finishing whiskeys, you can do that a lot of different ways. And some companies, they just throw some cubes of wood in the barrels. They take some staves, they'll put it in the whiskey, think Maker's Mark. But Barrell Craft Spirits, they actually sourced some Amburana barrels, 53-gallon barrels, and they finished this blended bourbon in those barrels. Now, my understanding is Amburana is a pretty strong note that can really influence the bourbon and the whiskeys. And so what Barrell Craft, and this is how I imagine it happened. They took the bourbon, they blended it, they finished it in the barrels of Amburana. Then they took it out, they're like, wow, that Amburana is really strong. So they took some unfinished bourbon, the same bourbon that was not finished, and they added it to the finished stock until it got to a point where they're like, wow, we can taste the bourbon, we can taste the Amburana finish, but it's balanced between the finishing stock and the unfinished stock, and it really shines. And I think they did a pretty good job. And they say on their website that they did that because they wanted the bourbon to shine first and foremost. Okay, let's get to the specs and stats of the whiskey and then get it. This is a blend of 5 straight bourbons, 4 from Indiana and 1 from Kentucky. So we have a 5, 6, 7, and 10-year-old Indiana bourbon and a 5-year-old Kentucky bourbon blended together in some unspecified proportion. They call this a derived mash bill, which I think is pretty clever actually. A lot of bourbons think High West and Redwood Empire and others, they will mix their own stock with MGP or other blends, or they'll mix a rye and a bourbon. And so what they do is they'll list all the mash bills. Bardstown Bourbon Company does the same thing. They'll list all the whiskeys that are blended into there, and they'll tell you what all of those are and what their mash bills are. I actually like Bardstown Bourbon Company. They also put the proportion of each one of those whiskeys in there. So you can make your own derived mash bill. But what Barrell Craft Spirits here has done for us is they took those 5 bourbons and whatever proportion they are with their mash bills, and they created for us a derived mash bill, which I think that's good enough. So we have 75% corn, 21% rye, and 4% malted barley. This is 116.42 proof, cask strength, and I paid $79.99 for this bottle, which I honestly believe is under MSRP, because I've seen guys who have said that they paid quite a bit more, or at least a little more than what I paid for this bottle. And I've seen a couple reports that maybe Barrell Craft Spirits is having some issues. And I don't know the truth of any of that, just I've seen a couple reports that maybe they've just sold a rick house, an embottling facility or something like that. Don't quote me on any of that. I don't know exactly what's going on. I don't know anything at all. But I do know that when I go to stores and I see their bottles, they do sit there for a long time. And there are multiple bottles of the Amburana finish at the store that I stopped at randomly on the way home. So is this the MSRP, or did I get a deal on this bottle? I do think so. I think it's less than the MSRP. But I paid $79.99 for it, and I couldn't tell you exactly what the MSRP is. Okay, let's get it. Had a long day at work today. Wasn't too bad, but here I am, nice, finishing it with this, I think a pretty good whiskey. Excited for this. What a nose, and it's just full of spice and gingerbread, and it has a sweetness to it that I thought was kind of a honey. But I tell you what, when I bought this and the Penelope Rio on the same night, and I nosed and had a sip of this first, and I thought that nose was just full of honey. But then I had a nose of the Penelope Rio, and I was like, wait, that's honey. Like, it's just dripping honey. The Barrell Craft Spirits is not. It has a thread of sweetness through it, but it's not a honey note on the nose. Again, Amburana is oftentimes is used to age that fermented sugarcane. And I don't know that these are virgin, if you will, are first use Amburana barrels, or are they second use? I don't know, but there's definitely a sweetness to that, but it's not all the way to a honey for me. Again, the spice, there's that gingerbread. I'm gonna say also graham crackers on the nose. It's just really nice and sweet. There's a spice component to it. There's also, I used to do some woodworking with some exotic woods. When my father passed away, he had some crazy woods at his house, and I brought it home and I made some chest sets and just some stuff out of those woods. And been cutting these exotic woods that I've never seen before, I've never seen since. And I've had my nose full of exotic sawdust. And that's kind of what I'm getting now. It's just, you can tell it's wood, but it's an unfamiliar wood, a thread of that through there. There's some spice in there. I'm just not familiar with it, but it's very, very nice. Just a hint of alcohol there, but it's very good. Anyway, cheers, guys. It is more sweet on the nose. It's more like a honey graham cracker coming through there. That doesn't translate to me on the nose as honey, but on the palate it does taste like honey to me. And I find that when I've been drinking, I would say balanced whiskeys, someone that is, or a whiskey that is sweet and has a nice balance with spice in it. Oftentimes for me, that sweetness hits first, and then afterwards, that spice just comes crashing home. And that's exactly what's going on here. It's a nice sweetness. It's a nice mouthfeel. It's that honey graham crackers, and then there's just those baking spices for days. And again, there's that unfamiliar wood, and I'm gonna assume that's just, obviously it's gotta be the Amburana. We do like finished whiskeys in the house, and I do like straight whiskeys that aren't finished as well. I just had the Old Overholt 10-year cask strength rye. I was drinking some cask strength High West bourbon last night. I mean, I do appreciate and like the purity of a nice, just straight whiskey that is not finished. But if you can find a nice finished bourbon or rye, man, I am down for that. And so far, this is really, I think, a pretty great finished whiskey. And I know some guys are like, the Amburana finished. I can see how it could be overpowering, but it's still, you get those threads of bourbon, those nice notes. You got some caramel in there. It's really, really nice, and I think it's done appropriately and with Barrell Craft Spirits, kind of a deft hand, if you will, to not overpower it with the Amburana and get enough bourbon in there that you can actually appreciate it. And it's still just that those honey graham crackers are just right there. I'm digging this. (116.42 proof). That's a nice proof. It's very, very close to Wild Turkey Rare Breed, which I think is a great pour. It's a really nice proof. It's not so hot that you're like gasping for breath. You're not overwhelmed by it, but it gives a nice richness and roundness to the pour that is so good. And it's really, the spice bomb is just continuing into the finish. And what it's reminding me of now is mulled wine. We're kind of new to drinking, and we've made mulled wine the last couple winters, and it's been really nice. And when you make mulled wine, you can do it in different ways. And one of the ways that we do it is a big bottle of wine in there, you put some whiskey in there, you take a bunch of spices and some orange and you just throw it all in there, some citrus in there, and heat it up for a while, and that whole house just permeates with that smell of those spices and the citrus. And that's how this is finishing to me. It's got a nice mouthfeel. It's like viscous and great. and it has all those spices that I'm enjoying. It's like a mulled wine with a little thread of citrus through it as well. It's got that, again, great sweetness. Nice roundness with all the spice and the balance. Guys, I think this is a pretty good whiskey here. And I know some people have even commented on my YouTube channel that Amburana finish is not their thing. And I'm not here to convince you to like Amburana or not. I'm just telling you that of the Amburana, I've only had this one in the Penelope Rio, and I'm gonna do this one here in a couple of nights as well. But I think this Barrell Craft Spirits is an excellent pour. It's got enough bourbon, just pushes through everything, but it's got a nice twist that's not overpowering in that Amburana finish. And it has everything that I'm looking for when I'm drinking a whiskey. Nice proof, nice mouthfeel, nice flavor, some sweetness and some spice. It's pretty great. So $79, heck yeah. I'm probably gonna go find myself another bottle here in the next week or two just to have at the house as a backup. All right, my guys, and I don't even really know what this competes with. Like comparable to the Penelope Rio, that was $89. And I don't know, I know RD1 has an Amburana finish. I don't know how many brands out there have had an Amburana finished whiskey. How about you? Have you had Amburana finished bourbon? Do you have a favorite? If so, what is it? Is it the Rio? Is it the Barrell Craft Spirits? Is it some other brand that perhaps I haven't heard of? This is something that's pretty new to me, and I feel like it's not, I feel like the Alfa Romeo Whistle Pig Piggyback, that Liche finished rye was super great, but it was, I'm not gonna say gimmicky, but it was really, really strong on that finish. I think this is more like some of the High West finished double ryes and bourbons that's more subtle, the finishing on it. So in my opinion, if you like to try different things, if you just like your Wild Turkey Rare Breed, just drink your Rare Breed and you're fine. But if you like to try different things, I think this is a great one to add to your collection. For $79.99, certainly, I'm happy to have this on my shelf. And I think if you're into new things, maybe you ought to give it a try as well. All right, my guys, thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, like it, subscribe to see more of my content. Again, I do both books and whiskey reviews. But for now, you know what to do. I hope you're reading something good and drinking something great. Turn the page and stay thirsty, my friends. Cheers.